The submersible had less than 90 minutes of power left when the sonar picked up something that shouldn't have been there. 7 miles down, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, for nearly 2 hours, the crew had been descending through water so dark that the pressure gauge felt like the only instrument on board they could still fully trust. Then came a shape on the sonar screen that didn't match the seafloor survey, didn't match any known formation, and didn't drift the way loose debris is supposed to drift. By the time the pilots swung the cameras toward it, the battery countdown had already started. What they found that day, and what researchers have turned up in the years since, has made the deepest place on Earth one of the most argued over frontiers left in ocean science, nearly 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific, in a trench that swallows sunlight, sound, and most of what we assumed about where life can survive. There is something down there that doesn't fit cleanly into the models. By the end of this, you'll understand why marine biologists are still debating what it means, and why parts of this mystery may never fully surface. To understand what happened 7 miles down, you have to go back further to a place most people have never really pictured. The Mariana Trench is a crescent-shaped scar in the Pacific Ocean floor, running along the edge of the Mariana Islands, carved out where one tectonic plate is slowly forced beneath another. At its lowest point, a region called the Challenger Deep. The seafloor drops to nearly 36,000 feet below the surface. That is deep enough that if you lowered Mount Everest into it, the summit would still sit more than a mile underwater. Humans first measured that depth in 1875, when the crew of a British survey ship dropped a weighted rope over the side and kept letting out line long after they expected to hit bottom. It took decades and far better instruments before anyone fully trusted the number, and it took nearly a century after that before anyone actually went down to see it for themselves. That is where the complication starts, and it is not a small one. At the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the water pressure is more than 1,000 times what it is at sea level, the equivalent of roughly 8 tons pressing down on every square inch of anything unlucky enough to be down there. No sunlight reaches that depth. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and the trench itself is still largely unmapped in fine detail because sending a vehicle down that far and getting it back is closer to a space mission than a dive. Only a handful of crewed descents have ever reached the very bottom. The first came in 1960 when 2 men rode a steel sphere called the Trieste down through nearly 7 miles of open ocean, listening to the pressure hull creak under strain that most engineers of the time considered untested territory. By most accounts, they reached the floor of the Challenger Deep and spent about 20 minutes there before beginning the ascent. And according to their own reports afterward, they saw a flatfish moving along the bottom. Something that would have meant complex vertebrate life existing at a depth many scientists assumed was too hostile to support it. Researchers have argued about that sighting for over 60 years since. Some think it was a resting sea cucumber misread in low light through a scratched viewport. Others still defend the original account. Neither side has ever definitively closed the question. For decades after that first dive, almost no one went back. The trench was too deep, too expensive, and too dangerous to justify frequent trips. So the Challenger Deep went largely unvisited by human eyes for more than 50 years. That changed in 2012 when a filmmaker and deep-sea engineer piloted a solo submersible to the bottom, collecting sediment, water, and biological samples that gave researchers their first substantial haul of material from the deepest point on the planet in half a century. What came back from that dive, and from the unmanned landers that followed it, is where the story starts to escalate. Researchers expected almost nothing living down there. What they found instead were entire communities of organisms that seemed to be doing just fine under crushing pressure, absolute darkness, and near freezing cold. Shrimp, like amphipods, swarm the trench floor by the thousands, scavenging on whatever organic material sinks down from the surface. 7 miles above, strange, gelatinous, single-celled organisms called xenophyophores, some larger than a human fist, despite being made of a single cell, carpet parts of the seafloor in numbers that surprised the scientists who first filmed them. And in 2014, cameras recorded a fish swimming at a depth of roughly 26,000 feet, later confirmed as a new species of snailfish and, at the time, the deepest living fish ever documented on camera. It looked almost translucent, fins spread wide, apparently unbothered by pressure that would crush most surface animals instantly. That should feel like a resolution, proof that life adapts, that the trench isn't as empty as everyone assumed. But that wasn't the only place this story kept getting stranger. Further into the trench system, past the flat, sediment-covered floor of the Challenger Deep, the seafloor turns violent in a different way. The Mariana Arc, the chain of underwater volcanoes running alongside the trench, hides some of the most extreme geology ever documented anywhere on Earth. At one site, researchers found an active volcanic vent pouring out molten sulfur, forming a small, glowing lake on the ocean floor. Something scientists studying it said resembled surface conditions on Jupiter's volcanic moon Io, more than anything expected in Earth's own oceans. At another vent nearby, the seafloor releases streams of liquid carbon dioxide directly into the water, bubbling up through white bacterial mats in a chemical environment closer to a distant planet than anything most people picture when they think of the ocean floor. No sunlight reaches either site, no plants, no algae, nothing that photosynthesizes. And yet entire ecosystems of bacteria, shrimp, and tube worms cluster around both vents, drawing energy directly from chemicals that would be lethal to almost every form of life on the surface. It should have ended there, a trench that is simply more extreme and more alive than anyone expected. It didn't. In 2019, a private expedition sent a submersible to the Challenger Deep multiple times over several weeks, part of an effort to reach the deepest point in all 5 of the world's oceans. The dives confirmed the trench's true depth more precisely than ever before, and the pilot spent hours at the bottom, longer than any previous crewed mission. He documented new species of amphipods never recorded before. He also documented something else, a plastic bag and a candy wrapper, resting on the seafloor nearly 7 miles down in a location so remote that reaching it took more advanced engineering than most spacecraft require. Human trash had beaten most human scientists to the deepest point on the planet. That detail connects directly to a discovery from 2 years earlier, when a separate research team pulled amphipods from several of the deepest points on Earth, including the Mariana Trench, and tested them for industrial pollutants. What they found should not have been possible. Every single sample contained measurable levels of man-made chemical pollutants, some of the same compounds banned decades earlier for their toxicity. Chemicals that had never been produced or used anywhere near that part of the Pacific. In some cases, the concentrations were higher than in crabs pulled from one of the most industrially polluted rivers in China. The deepest, most isolated point on the entire planet had already been reached by human contamination faster and more thoroughly than almost anyone studying the trench had expected. Researchers still don't have a full answer for exactly how much of it arrived through sinking debris, how much through the food chain, and how much through pathways no one has mapped yet. Then came the discovery that changed the story again, in 2014 and 2015. Underwater microphones anchored near the Mariana Trench picked up a sound unlike anything in the existing catalog of ocean noise. A strange metallic rising call that repeated at regular intervals through the night. Researchers nicknamed it after its odd, almost electronic texture, and for months, no one could confidently identify the source. Theories ranged from an unknown deep-sea species to equipment malfunction to something seismic happening far below. It took specialists comparing the recording against known whale calls before a likely explanation emerged. A previously undocumented vocalization from Bride's whales, a species known to pass through the region. Most researchers now consider that explanation the leading one, though a few in the field have noted that the match isn't perfect and that some of the finer acoustic details still haven't been fully accounted for. What ties all of these threads together? The sulfur lake that shouldn't exist under an ocean, the amphipods carrying decades-old pollutants, the plastic bag resting where almost nothing man-made should ever reach. The sound that took specialists months to even partially explain is the same underlying problem. Less than a quarter of the world's ocean floor has ever been mapped in real detail, and the Hadal Zone, the deepest layer of all, is the least explored part of that. Every expedition that reaches the Challenger Deep still comes back with something unaccounted for. Every unmanned lander that spends a few days on the bottom still records behavior or organisms or signals that don't match anything in the existing catalog. So did researchers ever explain what that first submersible crew saw on their sonar screen with less than 90 minutes of power left? By most accounts, later analysis pointed toward a dense cluster of marine snow and drifting sediment, moving in a current pattern that briefly mimicked something solid on the instruments. That is the official read. But the crew, who were actually there that day, have never fully agreed with it. And the raw sonar data from that specific descent has never been made public in full. What is certain is what was found in the years afterward: sulfur lakes, undiscovered species, human trash, a sound scientists are still only half sure about. What is uncertain is exactly what that first crew saw. And after everything, the trench has already forced scientists to admit they got wrong. That unresolved detail doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like the trench doing what it has done since 1875, giving up just enough to keep the questions coming and holding the rest 7 miles down where almost no one has ever actually looked. Marine biologists still can't fully agree on what that signal from the deep actually was. If you've got a theory, put it below. I read everyone.